Hello, everybody. How is it going today? Got a super secret stream here. I didn't tell anyone about this. I haven't even put it in the Discord yet, which is kind of stupid. I will post it in the Discord now when we play the intro. But yeah, I decided to do a super secret stream. I got back from Chicago yesterday, where I was at a conference with our great friends such as Slava and Don Corder of the Revolution Report, and of course the Great Khan, the executive chairman, the Mongol warlord Tanki. Haz al-Din was also there, as well as Chris Halali, international secretary of the ACP. Don, Haz, and Chris all gave brilliant speeches, and it was cool to hang out and talk with people. There were some people there that were new to the ACP, which was cool to see and to get to meet them. There were some people that I've met with many times now, and it was great to catch up with them. And there were even some people, some ops, some people who don't like the ACP who, and credit to them, they had the courage to come and they talked to me for about half an hour before the event. Some like college age kids, two college age kids, and then one of them had to go, but one of them stayed for the whole event and watched all the speeches. So credit to him for coming and actually, engaging with our arguments and what we're trying to do here with the American Communist Party. But either way, just got back and decided I'd hop on and do a casual little stream. It should be pretty chill. But yeah, wanted to talk about some of the things that happened in the news. I want to get back here on YouTube more. I've been doing TikTok a lot more lately, but my TikToks are getting really, really badly suppressed in terms of views, but mostly in terms of monetization. TikTok brought my I was getting 90 cents for every 1,000 views, which is pretty decent. And they moved it down to less than 1 cent per every 1,000 views. So taking a little break from TikTok and hoping the algorithm is more friendly to me when I return. But taking a break from TikTok gives me more time to come on the YouTube stream and interact with you all and talk about the news in a more long form way. And also today, we're going to dive into a concept in Marxist political economy that I've been looking at heavily lately, which is the difference between fictitious capital or money capital, and more specifically, the accumulation of money capital versus the accumulation of real capital. So that's something we'll also discuss today. And we're going to watch Alex Jones do stand-up comedy because this is a chill stream. And I thought that would be a funny video, and it popped up on my YouTube recommended feed today. And I'm like, I bet you a lot of people will want to see that. But like and share the stream. Join the ACP. Thank you so much, Sebastian. Sebastian is a member of the Midwestern Marx media team. Extremely hardworking person who donates, and I say donates because our production team is on a completely volunteer basis. So he gives his time to Midwestern Marx and to the class struggle and to the revolution and does a really great high quality job, despite the fact that TikTok is only paying me 1 cent per every 1,000 views. So we can't afford to pay our production team. They just do it because they care about the struggle. So solidarity with them. Thank you, Sebastian. Appreciate you for everything that you do. For real. Golmohar Bloom says, new to the channel. It's nice to see some leftists actually doing something. Wow. Thank you very much, Golmohar Bloom. I appreciate you for the $20 super chat. That's huge. Yeah, and I also appreciate hearing you say that. We're a completely people's-funded institute here at Midwestern Marx. We don't take money from any outside organizations or think tanks or whatever. Also, acp.us is how you join the ACP. I forgot to add that on to Sebastian's comment. But yeah, all of our money is from the people, but the commitment that we've made to you, the audience, and you, the community, from day one is that we will, if you place enough faith in us to give us, some of your money through super chats or whatever, the money that we know you work hard for in a situation where you're exploited and the cost of goods and the cost of living is always increasing, and where 80% of the country is living paycheck to paycheck, despite the fact that 80% of us are living paycheck to paycheck. people are still willing to donate money to the stream, which is amazing to me, and I'm so grateful. But we have committed from the beginning to using all that money to advance the class struggle, right? This is not a project that's intended to make me, Carlos, and Noah financially comfortable. It is a project to advance the class struggle. And if that wasn't the case, I wouldn't have been banned on TikTok 7 times, right? And that always happened when there was some kind of world event going on, like the Russian SMO, and I was banned for speaking the truth about them, right? But we're not here to be influencers or to make money. We're committed to advancing the class struggle and using the resources that you guys give us to do that. So I really appreciate you saying it's nice to see some leftists actually doing something, because that's exactly what we're trying to do, right? We're not taking this money and investing it in stocks, right? Or investing it in savings accounts, or in retirement accounts for me, Carlos, and Noah. I mean, we should do that. We should be financially literate and try to, try to make it save money so we can all retire when we're older. But our goal is to use the resources you guys give us and use the audience that you guys have given us to advance the class struggle. And that's what, the goal of the ACP is. And that's where all our resources have gone, and even forming the ACP, I don't even know if it was if we're looking at this from the perspective of we're trying to be influencers, and grow a bunch of influence and make a bunch of wealth, it probably doesn't make that much sense to form a political party, because of all the ire that draws and the division, and the hatred that can be drawn towards you from that. But we're not here to be influencers. Like I said, we're here to advance the struggle of the working class. So that was a really long rant, but I thank you for the $20 super chat. Glad you're here as a new viewer. I see you said, what do you think about Vaush earlier? I debated Vaush on Ukraine. If you're interested, it's on my channel. I also had a back and forth with Vaush about the DPRK, North Korea, which are both on my YouTube channel, Midwestern Marx, and you can check those out and kind of get an idea of my positions versus Vaush. But basically, I'm not a fan at all. And really, I see Vaush as like a crystallization, an embodiment of a lot of the things that are really wrong with the American left and that need to be changed about the American left, including, just being an influencer and saying what you have to say to not get banned, and to just, keep making money and living comfortably. But yeah, it's my feelings on Vaush. Thank you. All right, I'm trying to get to the intro here so I can finally play the intro, but got one more super chat here. Thank you, Jonathan Foster, very much. Chapter 27 of Capital One is important to understand. Absolutely. Jonathan Foster must have either been there this weekend or he must have seen the live stream of the talk, because I asked a question about, I think it's chapter 26. So maybe we're talking about different chapters, but I'm going to assume you're talking about chapter 26, primitive accumulation. We had this awesome discussion about primitive accumulation, which is a very special and unique chapter of Marxist Capital Volume 1. I'll pull it up and we can talk about it after I finally play the dang intro. But we had a really good discussion about it, and it is super important because basically Marx says that the capitalists try to say that they acquired their wealth through their industriousness and through their frugality, right? By working hard and pulling themselves up by their bootstraps and saving their money and being financially literate, they became capitalists. But really, the capitalists gained their wealth through genocide, slavery, and the worst kinds of violence. And you have these people who say that America can't be socialist because America's history is so bad, because our history is, one of genocide and colonialism. And it's like, that's the history of every class society. Every class society was founded on genocide and colonialism. The question is, where do we go from here? How do we improve it? So yeah, we will talk about chapter 26. He said, yes, that one. Okay, got you. Love your Marx breakdowns. Keep doing good work. Thank you so much. I'm glad you enjoy those. Is China a democracy? You know what? I will answer that question for you, but I'm going to answer it after we play the intro, because it's been 13 minutes and I haven't played the intro yet. So please enjoy this intro from our friend and comrade, Jesus Motorcycle, who I got to see this weekend for the first time since he made that intro. So I got to say thank you in person, which was cool. He did a great job. You'll see right now.
High Sheriff Hazard is a hard man to be. High Sheriff is his only plan. He digs through pockets, takes what he can, for he's High Sheriff Hazard. He caught me one evening, and here's what he said. You look like a Russian, you look like a red. And if you're fond of your skin and your head, beware the High Sheriff of Hazard. The answer is simple, the answer is clear. We all get together, ain't got nothing to fear. We throw the old bastard right out on his ear. Farewell to High Sheriff Hazard. High Sheriff Hazard is a...
Whoops, I had it on loop. Yeah, I hope people liked the intro. Seemed like people were liking it. Fire intro. LOL, Danny is such a giga chat in this. Dude, I thought the same thing. I was like, Danny just looks like a pimp. He's like this. And the camera's like looking up at him. He just looks like he's about to win the heavyweight title in boxing. Yeah, glad you guys liked it. It was in the style of like the True Detective opening, which was so creative because I was not expecting that. Like, I was expecting a more basic intro. And then we got that with the song that I requested, the High Sheriff of Hazard by Tom Paxton. It slaps. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, Danny, they can't stop the progress of history. No, they can't. The American Red says, yo, what's up, American Red? Fire intro. Red salute from New Zealand. Thank you, comrade. Red salute here from the United States. Glad to hear we have some support out there in New Zealand. This intro rules. Thank you. New intro, yes. So is China a democracy is the question. Thank you for the super chat, Evan Winchester. Yes, I mean, the easiest way to prove that is over 90% of Chinese people support their government, right? And people say that's due to propaganda. And I mean, yeah, on some level, the media has an effect, and the propaganda of the Communist Party does have an effect. But there's only so much that you can propagandize your people into supporting your government. Like, the United States is one of the most propagandized countries on earth. But, 17% of people think Congress is doing a good job. Most people are aware that our government is failing us, that our system is failing us. Whereas in China, 90% of people support the government, and that's not just because they're brainwashed. It's because every generation in China has inherited much, much, much better material conditions than the generation before them. And they've had far more opportunities than the generation before them, which in the US, now we're seeing, maybe for the first time in history, a generation of kids who has less opportunities than their parents and way less opportunities than their grandparents. Well, I mean, if our parents have less opportunities than their grandparents, then that would mean we're not the first generation to have less than the one before us. But you get what I'm saying. We've been moving in that direction. The retirement age is literally going up. It is going up. So as we automate more labor, And as we have an economy that can, be more automated, and we have to do less dangerous and harmful jobs, people are working more, right? And that's because of the contradictory nature of the system. So basically, I don't know how I got onto that rant, but you can't trick people into supporting, you can't just brainwash people into supporting your political system if your political system is failing them and trapping them in debt. So the fact that so many Chinese people support their government is the ultimate proof that they are in fact a democracy or a dictatorship of the proletariat or the popular classes. But Sebastian here gets a little bit more in depth, and I recommend people check out Roland Bohr's Socialism with Chinese Characteristics, a guide for foreigners. It's one of the best links between the English-speaking world and China. And Xi Jinping and the party have recently been making an effort to teach Westerners more about China, because I mean, they used to do none of that. China didn't care, right? Americans didn't know what was going on. A lot of communists thought they were actually moving towards capitalism because they wouldn't share what their strategy was. And on some level, it needed to remain secret because they were allowing private capital into their country, and they were going to try and use it to build socialism, as they have. And they, didn't necessarily want to give their strategy away to the CIA. But yeah, now we know a lot more about China thanks to the recent efforts of the party and the recent efforts of thinkers like Roland Bohr, who I think is really great. But yeah, he gets into the specifics of how it works. Basically, at least economically, there are party cadre, people who work for the Communist Party of China or within it, who are responsible for each geographic area. Both, combating political corruption and getting people's input on how they want things to be run politically, but more importantly, finding out what people need economically, finding out what they need in terms of material goods. So like early on in China, this meant going around and making sure that every place, had enough housing, right? The party cadre would make sure that every place has enough housing, and then they would report back to the Central Committee. And then the Central Committee could create economic plans that would bring more housing to the area that needed more housing, right? This is how they do central planning. And a lot of these positions are obviously elected by the people, a lot of these party positions, or elected within the party, depending. So again, way more democracy than what we have here in the US, where the Democrats can literally just appoint Kamala Harris without her receiving a single vote. But they report back to the Central Committee, and then the economy can be planned based on what people need. So back then it was like housing and stuff like that. But now it's like Wi-Fi, right? This rural region doesn't have Wi-Fi. Well, okay, let's plan the economy to make sure that they have full universal free Wi-Fi in that place, which is like, paying $80 a month for Wi-Fi here in the US. Like, oh my goodness. Please, let's do central economic planning and nationalize these stupid ass companies like Mediacom. But anyways, so basically the party and the central leadership is responsible to the people at every level. And there was corruption in the party in the 90s, mostly like corporations and private entities bribing party members to do their bidding instead of doing the will of the people. But then in the 2010s, in the last decade, a massive anti-corruption effort was launched by Xi Jinping, and public trust in the party had reached an all-time low in China. And after these anti-corruption efforts, public trust in the party is up to over 90%, because they've been so successful that distrust of the party has been pretty much done away with, because anyone who was corrupt was just thrown out. It was like Stalin's purges, but more less people being shot. And there wasn't a world war going on, so it was, it wasn't something where they needed to get these people out immediately because they might be spying for the Nazis. But anyways, that was super effective in China and increased the level of democracy, right? Like there's levels of democracy. It's dialectical, like and do we even want full democracy? Do people want to make every single, or vote on every single little decision that a country makes? No, sometimes you just want, a leadership that you trust to make certain decisions. But they have much more control over their what happens economically. They have much more control over what happens politically. They have much more control over who the politicians that run their country are. Yeah, that was kind of a long ramble, but I mean, too, the other thing is like this is the failure of liberalism and the Enlightenment. Is the Enlightenment basically says we're no longer going to be ruled by the divine right of kings. We're not going to be ruled by monarchs. We need to be ruled by democracy and by logos, by our logic and our reason. Well, that is good, but you can't have a government that's governed by logic and reason when you have a capitalist economy, because the capitalist economy is illogical. It's not reasonable. It's not doing what's best for everybody. It's doing what's best for profits. So the people who accumulate the profits and control all the wealth are then going to use that wealth to control the political system. And then the political system becomes irrational from the perspective of the entire working class, which is the American political system right now is a perfect example. So you can't have political democracy really without economic democracy. If all the media is owned by, a handful of corporations, and then all of the necessary means of life, all of the housing, all of the food, all of the water, all of the farmland is controlled by the same people, and those people in the US at least are legally allowed to bribe the government, which is what Citizens United did. It made it so corporate money and corporate political spending was protected by free speech laws, so they could spend as much as they want. You have corporations literally bribing the government, and then lobbying groups are the ones writing the bills that the government, pushes. And corporate think tanks are the ones writing the stories and the talking points that the corporate-owned news then pushes. When you have a situation like this where the means of communication and the means of production are owned by a handful of people in the same class, the capitalist class, how are you supposed to have a democracy? Like, obviously, those people are going to manipulate the political system and the media and the cultural superstructure in order to benefit themselves, in order to do what's good for them. And because they're a minority of society, because they don't make up the majority, and because their interests are actually diametrically opposed in many ways to the interests of the majority, they're going to end up screwing the majority over and over and over and over and over again. And this, government that we were supposed to have based on rationality is nothing like the U.S. government is nothing like the ideals that were laid out in the Constitution, being, a government of, by, and for the people, or the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, being a government of, by, and for the people, and, having this right to life and pursuit of happiness, or even, some of the things that were put into the amendments later on, like freedom of speech. We don't live up to any of these ideals. And the reason is because of our economic system, because of capitalism. So the real reason China's a true democracy is because they control their economic system, because they control production. And that in turn allows them to create the kind of political system that they want. Although production did get a little out of control in the 90s, which is when all that corruption happened. That was when they were allowing more private entities in, and they ran a little bit wild, and you had some corruption, but thankfully they recalibrated. Thank you for the super sticker, Luigi J. How's Mario doing, Luigi? I'm sorry, that was stupid. Why don't I have my, hold on, folks. We need to do this now. After that amazing joke I just cracked. Oh, why is it not working? My Stream Deck isn't working. My little thing that I can use to press buttons and make noises. It always glitches out on me, so it's almost not worth it. Let's see if I still have a laugh one. Yeah, that was definitely worth it. Thank you, Luigi. Stu, wait, you don't want corporations that control the media to advertise political opinions to the public for them to adopt? You hate freedom, sir. Exactly. You have to give all the media to corporations. Otherwise, you hate freedom, because they had to pull themselves up by their bootstraps to control it. Do you hate bootstraps or something? Thank you so much, Stu, for the $5. Yeah, it's they always talk about concepts like freedom in the abstract, and that Lenin quote is immortal. Like, the liberal always talks of, it's either democracy or freedom. I can't remember which one, but the liberal always speaks of democracy or freedom. It works either way. But the communist never forgets to ask freedom or democracy for which class. Because when the capitalists say things like freedom, literally what they mean is freedom of capital, freedom of corporations to do what they want. Countries who don't have freedom are like Venezuela, where they're nationalizing, the oil industry and investing the profits in welfare programs and things for the people and development. That's what's unfree from the perspective of the U.S. Even though it's making their working class people more free and improving their lives, it's unfree because corporations have less free reign. Corporations are being suppressed and cracked down on a little bit. So every time the U.S. talks about these abstract concepts like freedom, you always got to ask, freedom for who? And if you think about it a little bit, you'll always find that they're speaking from the perspective of the ruling class. They're speaking from the perspective of big banks and shareholders who control them through advertising and ownership. I keep telling people that puns is the highest form of humor. I think you're right, Joey. I think you're right. I don't know, though. I've been watching the Joe Rogan Experience lately, and I'm pretty sure that Joe Rogan and Joey Diaz screaming into a microphone and humping stools is the highest form of comedy. But actually, Joey Shant's X videos or, TikTok videos or wherever you make those videos, those are the highest form of humor, I think. Those make me laugh harder than a lot of stuff. Thank you so much for that $5 super chat, though, Joey. But by the way, Joey's a good guy. We were asking about certain people who are in the ACP this week, just getting a background on them and getting to know them better. And everybody who knew Joey spoke highly of him and said he was never involved with any bullshit, with any organizations. So shout out to Joey. Thank you for the $5. I appreciate that a lot, for sure. You bet, buddy. Appreciate you not being a degen, for lack of a better word. All right, let's talk about... Well, I don't want to do the Alex Jones video right now. So let me see if I can find the part where Haas and Don and Chris answered my question about primitive accumulation here. Because this is pretty interesting. So for those who don't know, primitive accumulation is chapter 26 of Marx's Capital. It's very short. Look how short this is. It's like 2.5 pages in the hard copy. And this is a very special chapter. It's like a break from the other chapters. It's different. It's presented in a similar way, but it's so short, and it's making an argument that doesn't necessarily flow perfectly with the rest of the book, or it's different from a lot of the arguments made in the other chapters. And basically what he's talking about here is, how did the capitalists get their wealth? How did class societies become class societies? How did the people who own become the people who own? And how did the people who work become the people who work? And the myth that's told to us by the capitalist ruling class is that they gained their wealth through industriousness and through frugality. By saving their money and working hard, they were able to elevate themselves to the top of society. And what Marx shows or says in this chapter is that's not the case, that primitive accumulation was a process of genocide and slavery and divorcing people from the land and tools that they need to produce food and the things they need to survive. It's a process of divorcing people from those things so that they're forced to be wage laborers, so that they can't grow their own food anymore. And they have to sell their labor in the market to a capitalist. And this is how capitalism asserts itself around the world. And what Chris and I were talking about is how there doesn't necessarily have to be a timeline for primitive accumulation. Because what I was saying was that the process of settler colonialism in the U.S. was the form of primitive accumulation, that there were the indigenous people who had their own mode of production, which was a more communal mode of production. And then the Europeans came and through the genocide and the process of settler colonialism, divorced them from the land, forced them to be wage laborers or just to starve. and divorced them from the tools and crushed the mode of production that the indigenous communities had, replacing it with capitalism and slavery. And then through the Civil War, slavery was done away with. But that was essentially, that's an example of primitive accumulation. You have these people who have their own mode of production. They're living communally, right? They're sharing their goods. They don't have this rigid capitalist class system. And then the Europeans come in and genocide them, steal all the land, steal all the tools, and institute their system. And the indigenous people that are still alive, if they want to partake in the new system, they have to sell their labor in the market like everyone else or be a slave. So this is primitive accumulation. But then Chris brought up the point that it's not just that, though, because Marx doesn't put a timeline on primitive accumulation, right? It can go back even before that. And what he says is that a lot of the indigenous communities in America originally came from Asia. And with Asia, they brought with them, a more communal mode of production, which is what Asia had compared to Europe, even in ancient history, which then had to be destroyed by capitalist Europe in order to institute capitalism. But this is very interesting. And this is so important because there are so many people nowadays who say that, America is uniquely evil. America is uniquely evil so that it can never be socialist, right? The American working class is inherently reactionary. They're imperialist opportunists who can never engage in class struggle and do socialism because America's too bad. America had slavery. America had genocide. America had the theft of land and the forcing of people off the land in order to seize that land and use it for capital accumulation, which is called the process of enclosure. But every class society had this, or every capitalist society had this. This is the same thing that happened to the peasants in Europe. They were forced off their land, and then they were forced into, the centers of industrial production, the cities, where they would try to sell their labor to the capitalists, the new dominant class. So you had all these peasants who previously, for generations had worked the land under kings and lords. And now they were divorced from the land, divorced from the only way they knew how to produce food and what their families needed to survive. And they're forced to sell their labor in the market. And they would migrate to the cities where there was more market activity and where there was more industrial capital. So, the European capitalist societies are based on genocide, slavery, and the process of enclosure, too. So what is this idea that the United States is too reactionary to have socialism? Every class society starts out as being based on genocide and slavery, and the process of enclosure, because that's how you create private property. You can't have private property which is owned, by some random guy who doesn't work, while other people work the land for him and he just takes all the profit. You can't have that without violence and without divorcing people from the land, because for years, people had just been producing what they needed, and sharing it. And in order to remove them from that land and seize it from yourself, or seize it for yourself, you have to use violence. And this is how feudalism emerges, right? This is how capitalism emerges. This is how various slave societies emerge. It's just through the use of violence to say, this land is mine. It's my land. But that's how all class societies were created. It's not just the US. It's just so stupid. I don't get why people don't see this. I guess I can try.
Characteristic to any state all over the world. It just depends on. Right now, we're an independent state. The first main question was bickering and yelling and this, like the Gen Z these days. You call them and they're like
Marxist Leninists, but we're very open about what new synthesis
would have probably continued to harass the country, but we wouldn't have had the nightmare that was Pinochet and people.
Oh, that was a good point by Don. He was talking about how socialist states need to use state power and how that was the failure of Allende that allowed Pinochet to come to power.
Separation also gives us different perspectives. It gives us
that is going to be really ugly. And
frankly speaking, no
in these forms of. We're scared to resistance.
I'm going to find it, y'all. Sorry.
Yeah, rejected. I think.
Oh, yeah, we'll project.
Yeah, we'll project.
Slava, maybe you could call on people and then they can address the question to whoever.
Sure. Eddie?
So I wanted to ask a question about chapter 26 of Capital on primitive accumulation during Chris's talk, and then Oz actually happened to bring it up in his, which is perfect. But could you guys expand a little bit on that chapter and what it's about? Because it's a very special and short chapter of volume 1 where Marx, it's like 2.5 pages, and it doesn't necessarily flow with the rest of the book, but he's laying out basically how class societies are created through the expropriation of land and whatnot. So could you expand on that chapter a little bit more? Either one.
Yeah, well, I think this is a kind of ironical, it's an example of Marx's kind of ironical writing style. And you need to understand the context, which is that there was a kind of a prejudice that was lurking in classical political economy, which was searching for the fundamental foundation and the basis of what we call the kind of voluntaristic market relationships of capitalism, right? You have individualistic liberal thinkers like Locke attempting to, this notion of social contracts and kind of, at first you establish the sovereignty of the individual, and then on the basis of this are relationships based on pure exchange, voluntaristically possible. But what Marx is trying to speak to is that at the foundation of capitalism is a profound, actually, social violence, right? Or we should call it an anti-social violence, right? Where actually primitive accumulation it depicts a picture which is the opposite of the kind of Adam Smith free market of voluntary relationships. People aggregated, their labor aggregated after divorcing the means of production from them in these kinds of, well, I can't call them communes, but it's like they're aggregated and pushed in these forms of radically artificial kinds of social existence, and they're treated purely in a collective way. And their labor is Marx is showing how labor, at its most fundamental, when it's exploited, is exploited socially and on a collective level, right? And in order to alienate people from their means of production, they need to be kind of herded into plantations and other.
So I don't have much to say on that because Haas and Chris cover it all. It's really brilliant. But let me throw the link in the chat for anybody who wants to go watch that and learn more about primitive accumulation. Because Haas and Chris, like I just explained primitive accumulation to you as best as I could. But they come at it from a different angle and they hit aspects that, maybe I missed. So if you're interested in learning more about that topic, definitely check it out. And it's so interesting, like what Haas is saying, it's the opposite of the Adam Smith, or what were those novels? Oh, you guys, what were those novels in the early 1900s or maybe late 1800s that were about capitalists? And just like how they worked hard and how they were industrious and frugal, and that's how they made their money. Not Ayn Rand. They were like kids' books. What were those? Does anyone know what I'm talking about? I need to do Chat GPT real quick. They were like in the early 1900s. They were like fiction books. I'm using Chat GPT. No idea, bro. Nobody knows. Nobody has any idea what I'm talking about. It was like books where like capitalists are the good guys, basically. And like the whole moral of the story would be like work hard. And Horatio Alger. Yes. Is that what I'm thinking of? Yeah, Horatio Alger. Yeah. Like the Luck and Pluck series or Ragged Dick. What a name. LOL. But the Horatio Alger books, they were like the Luck and Pluck series focused on personal virtue and industriousness leading to success. And the Ragged Dick book focuses on, it's a rags to riches book, emphasizing hard work, perseverance, and moral character as the pathways to success. So basically saying you achieve success by being frugal, industrious, and moral. And as Haas is saying there, it's the exact opposite. You get rich by being antisocial, by being violent, by being hateful, by being selfish, by being greedy instead of cooperative. Daniel says, "Oh right, yeah, deferatio Alger, yeah." I wasn't explaining it very well, but yeah, he was like known for that genre, and it's it's a perfect example of the superstructure reflecting the economic base. As capitalism is becoming dominant in the mid 1800s, because he published those. It was the mid to late 1800s. I was wrong about it being the 1900s, but it was 1868 was that Ragged Dick. That's a pretty provocative title for 1868. Just kidding. Got to stop making stupid jokes about the Ragged Dick book. But yeah, he was like known for that, and that obviously that's the kind of fiction, that's the kind of cultural work that's going to be produced at that time. And Ayn Rand was similar, although of course she lived in the Soviet Union, so she was big on demonizing the evil collectivists. Yeah, sorry, one sec, I'm trying to do something on my iPad here. Okay, we got it. I was just gonna say BioShock Infinite. 1868 is basically 1900s. Basically, I guess. There is a few things that changed. Do better, Eddie. I will try in the better. I will try in the future, sorry. I will try in the better. Straight dick used to mean getting a stern nonsense talking to. Oh, I didn't know that. Or no nonsense. Gotcha. Ayn Rand was just Orwell for libertarians. Yeah. I suppose. I don't know if I see the comparison or not, but yeah. Speaking of Orwell, Aldous Huxley's Brave New World is so much better than 1984. So much better. Like, it describes society. Like, if you read Brave New World, it actually sounds a lot like society today. Like, they focus on, of course, the division of class, right? You have people living in like luxury in like a cloud city, and then you have people living in extreme poverty. I haven't read the book in forever, but then mainly they talk about the hypersexualization of children, which is 100% something that we've seen in our society in the last 40 years, especially. And the and that's whether you're talking about the media and culture and shows like Euphoria. Sorry if anyone likes that show, it's fucking weird. Stuff like that, or people like Jeffrey Epstein and the actual child sex trafficking and sex trade, which maybe I shouldn't say that or I might get banned on YouTube, but it is real. So yeah, the hypersexualization of children is a theme in Aldous Huxley's Brave New World, as well as this pill, stoma. Stoma is this pill that everyone takes, and it takes away their alienation and their anxiety, but it also, kind of blunts like their hopes and dreams and the things that make them people. So that everyone's just passive and, going along with the society and government. Like that is the American pharmaceutical industry. You know what I mean? Like that is Adderall or opioids, or these pills that they give us to alleviate our stress or just to get us through the freaking day. And I don't blame anyone. Like, I don't blame you if you take Adderall because you got to work, right? Because you got to work 40 hours a week and you feel like you'll actually go insane and quit your job and not be able to get enough sleep and go crazy while still living paycheck to paycheck if you don't take Adderall while you go to work at a desk 50, 60 hours a week. I get it. I get why people would do it, living in this system. But that doesn't, so it's what I'm saying there is it's not a guilt thing, right? It's not me saying you're a bad person because you take Prozac. I know people whose lives have improved because of Prozac. It's like, whatever. We live under capitalism anyways. As long as you're not using Prozac to get high and then say everything's great, nothing's wrong with the world. And the people, I know communists who Prozac has helped them. So it is what it is. There's no judgment here, on a medical level or psychological level or interpersonal level. But, you know, understand what it is on a structural level. The Adderall was invented in World War II. They were called pep pills, and they would be given to the soldiers so they could keep marching all night, so that they could stay up for 24 hours straight and still be laser focused. And that's what they give kids now, so that they can sit in class. And I did a video today on TikTok about how kids these days, no, but for real, kids these days, and when I was a kid, we stopped having recess when I was in 6th grade. 6th grade, we stopped doing recess. We stopped going outside and playing with our friends cooperatively. 6th grade. That's when you're 11 or 12. So, and this might be my most anarchist take, but whatever, public education is good. But the current system is called the factory school system, or the industrial school system, which means it was created with the explicit intention. This isn't me making this up. This is why the education system was created. And this was the kind of education system that like Adam Smith promoted. It was created with the situation, or with the intention of creating, drones, creating people who could work for 8 hours a day in a desk or in a factory and not complain. So, that's what we do to our kids. At 11 or 12 years old, they stop going outside and playing when they're freaking 11, dude. Then, and what is it then? It's sit in a desk for 8 hours a day until you can finally leave and go do sports, which thank God I, had sports as a kid, or I would have gone insane. And then they tell you have ADD if you're like me, and you feel like you're going crazy sitting in school 8 hours a day, and like you only are having fun when you go to wrestling practice after. That's you now have a disease, you now have a disorder, according to them. We make kids sit in desks 8 hours a day when they're 11 or 12, and it's so obvious. The whole goal is just to get them to be drones, right? To get them used to what adult life is going to be like. But when you're 11, your 11-year-old should be allowed to go outside and play like 4 hours a day at least. And that's during the day when the sun is out, so they can get some damn vitamin D. Like, what are we doing here? And again, this might be my most anarchist take, but I'm not against public education. I'm not against schools. My dad was a public education teacher. He's a public school teacher.
People couldn't believe.
But I always just thought it was insane that they take recess away from you when you're 11. And then you're just at a desk. You're at a desk. And if you can't do it, here's your stoma. Here's your Brave New World stoma. Here's your Adderall. So your kid's personality goes away and they're just freaking locked in at their desk all day. What are your thoughts on Erdogan? I don't know. Erdogan, you mean? Like the Turkish leader? Or the Erdogan market, the supermarket chain in America? I don't know much about that. Thank you, though. If you mean Erdogan, I'm not a fan. Thank you so much for the super chat. Any update about Danny? Danny's doing good. Yes. I mean, Danny had and I can't even get into it fully because, some of it's personal, but just if you're religious, or even if you're not, say a little prayer for Danny. He's fine. He's doing great. I thank you for asking, Popers. It's very kind of you. And thank you for the $3 super chat as always. Danny's doing fine. You don't have to worry about him. But if you're religious, or even if you're not, maybe just say a little prayer for Danny, because he had an all-time series of unfortunate events week, like last week. I can tell you some of it. For one, detained and questioned by the FBI, had his stuff taken. But also during that whole time, he had a toothache, like a horrific toothache. And then once he got back to New York after dealing with all that crap, he had a bunch of other crap to deal with, like personal issues and stuff. So just one of those weeks where life was like kicking Danny in the teeth, just for trying to be a good person and trying to go to the Palestine Film Festival. But yeah, he's the best. Love Comrade Danny. I wish he was here. The fact that Adderall was invented for the military isn't relevant. Well, the history of any compound is relevant. right? If you're looking at how Adderall developed and evolved, and how it originated versus how it's used today, you have to understand how it originated. You have to understand that it was used as pep pills, and that's Adderall's function, though. The reason I say that isn't to say that giving Adderall to children is the same as giving Adderall to soldiers, but it locks you in. It keeps you hyper focused, and it keeps you going even when your body and your mind are telling you to stop, which can be a useful compound. I'm not saying Adderall should be abolished or whatever, and I'm not saying there won't even be Adderall under socialism. But what I do think happens is that we over medicate the population in order to just keep the system going. We don't question, maybe there's something wrong with society that's making it so everybody needs to be on Prozac or Adderall or they struggle to function, right? They don't ask that. They ask, how do we keep the current society going? How do we keep speculator and banker profits high? How do we keep people in the workplace and keep them from overthrowing us? Well, one of the ways to do it is to give them these pet pills that we developed for the soldiers in World War II, or give them these opioids, And again, that's why I put the disclaimer, like, if you have a diagnosis and these things help you with life, good. Take them. Don't feel fucking bad about it. They improve your life. I got no problem. Meth started before Adderall in Japan. Interesting, Joey. All right, interesting. Yeah, I got no problem with you, taking that. And I can't promise you that capitalism is going to collapse tomorrow. I wish I could promise you that. I wish I could tell you, throw your Adderall away, because tomorrow you're going to be living a more fulfilling life where you actually have free time, and where you actually have access to healthy food that doesn't clog your brain and make it harder for you to focus. They have done studies on kids with ADHD where they change their diet and they change their environment, and over 70% of the kids' symptoms go away. All right, so this is what I'm saying. I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with taking these compounds to survive under capitalism. What I'm saying is that I think capitalism is inducing us with anxiety and depression and fatigue that is pressuring us to take these compounds, and the pharmaceutical industry, rather than question the system itself, is like, yeah, just load the people up with the pep pills. It worked for the soldiers in World War II. You know what I mean? Yes, drugs are overprescribed because it makes kids easier to manage. Yes, that's very true, very true. But ADHD is a legit brain disorder, and some people have bad enough to require treatment. I agree, and I think it does require treatment, but then the question becomes, what is treatment? And when you're dealing with a capitalist healthcare system, even though, like I just said, they've done studies where 70% of kids have their ADHD cured or improved greatly by a change in diet, rather than doing that, the first thing they jump to is pills. And I know I've been to psychologists, I've been diagnosed with hyperactive and what's the other one? Impulsive ADHD. I'm like 99% impulsive ADHD and then like 70% hyperactive ADHD. If I take the test, it's all out, but there's never any. They'll talk to you, right? They'll help you talk through it. But a lot of these psychologists aren't like, let's try changing your diet, or let's try a lifestyle change. It's almost always, so do you want Adderall? Which, again, if you're an adult, because I know I worry about Adderall with kids too, because it can help, but it can also, stunt growth and things like that. So I worry about it there. But like, if you're an adult and the side effects of Adderall and you're using it to help you get through life under capitalism, yeah, no shame to you. And I've done it. Yeah, I've been prescribed Adderall, full disclosure. I have been prescribed Adderall, and it has, in certain ways helped me greatly. And I've always ended up going off it or going back to using it extremely sparingly because of the side effects and the fact that I feel like it blunts my creativity as like a content creator in a lot of ways. It can also help me, it's also helped me with certain stuff. So I'm not saying it's all bad as a compound. It's the same with like LSD, right? Like Carlos and I were talking about this because, we're Marxist Leninists, and like the CIA did so much during the 70s, during the hippie era and during Vietnam to drug up the left, to make the left a bunch of, LSD loving drugged out hippie potheads or whatever, rather than organized fighters for the working class. And they of course, there was MK Ultra and all the brainwashing projects with LSD, but also there's an abundant. So what I was saying is, as Marxist Leninists, we tend to be like, no drugs, no LSD, no weed at the meetings. We got to focus when we're here. We're here to work. We're not here to, smoke weed and do LSD. But there's an abundant, I used to be really interested in psychedelic compounds, and like there's an abundance of evidence that they have great therapeutic effects. There's a compound called ibogaine that's like over 80% effective in getting people to stop smoking after they have one trip with ibogaine. There's an abundance of it, or not an abundance, because this hasn't been studied because of like the CIA and the so-called war on drugs. But when LSD has been used in like a therapeutic setting where you can control the environment, it's had really, really positive effects in helping people to overcome trauma. And even politically, it can help you kind of see past your own ego and see the world in a more collective way for a little bit. Like, and the problem with these drugs is the reason people have bad trips is because they're in a bad environment, right? They take LSD and then they go to a party thinking they're going to have fun. And all of a sudden their ego starts to go away and they're seeing the world through a whole new way. And they're questioning how they've lived life in the past and why they've been so selfish in the past and why they haven't cared about humanity in the collective. And they're at the middle of a party with people just getting fucked up, and people freak out. It's like, that's how you have bad trips. And what the CIA did was dosed people with LSD and then, tortured them and then controlled their environments to just blast their brain with different stimuli and break their brains. And, they would do it over and over and over again. Like dose these people with LSD a bunch of days in a row and then deprive them of sleep. So they're like hallucinating and stuff, and it destroyed a lot of people's brains forever. But that's just how capitalism and our current class society has used the compound LSD, right? What uses could there be for LSD that help society to flourish, right? What uses could there be for mushrooms or whatever if you take them on a therapist's couch and then you walk through your childhood trauma where you were beaten or whatever? It's been proven that these do have a lot of beneficial effects, but, you could even say the same thing with drugs like Adderall. Maybe there is, a medicinal purpose to Adderall. Maybe Adderall should be prescribed to some people on some level. But under our capitalist system, we'll never know because Adderall is just being injected into the working class to keep them going, to keep them exploited and keep the profits high. So that's drugs. I see a lot of chats going off I see chat is going off right now. I'm not surprised by that. Everyone's got unique feelings on drugs. I'm not interested in psychedelics in the same way that I used to be. But I'm definitely not one of these just like hardcore dogmatic anti-drug conservatives. Like, and same with pot, and yeah. Like, I don't think you should smoke pot all day if you can help it. It really prevents you from focusing and can prevent you from being productive, and you're just not going to be as cognitively with it. But, people are dealing with pain. Pot's better than opioids. And as a sleeping medicine, it can be one of the most, healthy sleeping medicines that there are. It's way better than taking, Advil PM or whatever. So I don't know. These things need to be viewed dialectically, and the way that these compounds, these mind-altering compounds, are used under capitalism is always in a capitalist manner to keep profits high, either through the sale of those compounds or through keeping the working class alive and kicking. Not the society must change, but the brains of the sheeple. yeah, that's like the parody of people with LSD. They just sit there and be like, everyone just needs to take LSD and realize that love is the key. And if we all take LSD and join hands, we will all love each other and then society will change. It's like, no, you have to change the system. But LSD can help your brain shift and help you see the reality of the system. Because, I mean, we were talking about this week, like, what does it take to actually change someone's mind on something? What does it actually take to get people to go from saying, you know, I am a conservative to I am a communist? It's a long process of learning and development, and you know, not everybody is as inclined to learn, and to you know, not everyone is willing to change. And a lot of times it takes like an event, you know, it takes like getting a long-term illness and drowning in debt from the healthcare system before you realize, okay, this system really is screwed up, right? It takes personal experience like that, an event. But you know, if there's a compound that can just alter the way that you see the world, like that can also change the way that you see the world politically instantly. And it can allow people to get past their ego, which sometimes is the biggest barrier to seeing reality, to seeing the truth, because you just want to be right, you don't want to be wrong, so you dig your heels in on positions that you have, and don't want to see the reality, or don't want to see the opposite side of the argument. And sometimes these compounds remove your ego, and then you're like, oh my gosh, I'm a dumbass, why didn't I just admit that I was a dumbass? Not that I've ever done these compounds, of course. Ever looked into Ken Wilber's Society and Ego Stages as AQAL and Generational Historical Analysis in the Fourth Turning? I think a Marxist analysis of those would be interesting. Thank you guys for the work. Stay strong, bro. Thank you so much, Voice of the People. Thank you for the $20. I really appreciate that, brother. Huge super chat. We've been getting a bunch of really big super chats today. Thank you all so much for this. I know the vast majority of you are working class people who might be living paycheck to paycheck, or who might be drowning in debt. So just know that I take that into account when you send me super chats, and we do everything we can here at the Institute to reinvest the money you entrust with us into the advancement of the class struggle. And right now that means the building of the American Communist Party. But thank you so much for this. The ego stages and generational historical analysis. You know, I obviously I don't know what the book's about. I've never heard of it, but just based on the title, like the ego stages, that sounds interesting and like something I might be interested in. I won't be able to do a Marxist analysis for a while because I'm finishing my gold standard paper, but maybe eventually. Oh well, there have been a lot of scholarly articles written on it, so this might actually be kind of easy. It looks like maybe I don't have to read the whole book, but yeah, that sounds super interesting, boys, and could be super useful. Like I was saying, you know, the ego can be a barrier to learning and changing your positions, so it's something that we should try to understand as socialists, you know. Thank you so much, Voice of the People, very much. Did you talk about the Haas and Halali speech yet? A little bit. Yeah, I didn't dive deep into them. We mostly talked about my question to Haas and Halali about primitive accumulation, but their speeches were brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Chris explained the difference between like National Socialism of the Nazis and ethno-nationalism versus socialism taking a national form, and how we can't be ethno-nationalists, how we can't divide ourselves by, you know, ethnicity and race if we want to unify by class. And Haas's speech was brilliant too. I'm drawing a blank on the main points that Haas hit on in his speech, but it was fantastic. I don't know why I can't think of it right now. But yeah, I gotta rewatch it. Shout out from New York, ACP on top. Let's go, American Partisan. Thank you, brother. American Partisan's been out there hitting the streets, doing great work with ACP New York. Just today, I myself was out there with ACP Iowa, which is not actually an official club yet, unfortunately, because we need to elect our party executive, or sorry, our club executive. But while ACP New York was out there cleaning too, I don't know if they cleaned today, but they have been cleaning a bunch lately. And shout out to them for that. We were out here with ACP Iowa cleaning the streets, and we got a whole bunch of bags of trash. Just a bunch of communist wrestlers and a John Deere union worker cleaning up trash and making the community better. So, hell yeah. Great work, ACP on top for sure. Yo, ACP. No worries. I think it's interesting. Would recommend. Yeah, I'll check it out. Voice of the People, because it's interesting to me. The ego, the concept of the ego is always something that I've found very interesting. And how do you deal with your own ego? I used to think, when I was more into that like psychedelic world, I used to think that, letting go of your ego is the key, being fully collective and not being an individual at all. But I think it's more dialectical than that, because we are individuals. We are, one individual interpreting the earth through our individual senses, but we're also interconnected in every single way. We're interconnected with nature, the earth, and with humanity. And this is true, in every way, especially today, where the entire economy and political structure is globalized, and we have this fully interconnected, globalized, cooperative world, or not cooperative because of imperialism, but it could be a cooperative world. But you rely on other people for your food and your shelter and for everything. So yeah, you are cooperative, but you're a collective, but you're an individual existing within the collective. And that's the dialectical understanding that you have to have. If you just try and have no ego, you won't get anything done. You won't be productive. You have to have some ego and realize that you're only one individual and you can only do what you can do. But then, understand that you're also part of a collective and you can do more when you work together. And you need to rely on others for help. And the way to feel good is by dedicating your life to helping others, I feel like. ACPR based AF, let's go. Thank you, Feathers. Appreciate that, brother. ACP Pennsylvania, about to have another cleanup. Let's go. Boom, boom. Way to go, Eddie. I saw your cleanup today. Thank you, Mauricio. It was great to see you this week. Thank you so much. Glad that you were able to make it. Glad we were able to hang out again. And thank you. Love it. Lead by example. You bet. Thank you. That is how I am. My dad was a wrestling coach, and one of the best things I thought he did was he would do the laundry for the wrestlers every single day. And every other wrestling team I was ever on in my life, you would have a schedule, and the wrestlers would take turns doing the laundry, the athletes, the kids. But my dad felt like that was a form of servant leadership, that he was being, which is a Christian thing. But that he was being a leader by serving his athletes, and he was leading by example and showing the athletes how to serve. So that's what I don't know. I think executive board members should not be afraid to get out there and get their hands dirty and clean up a little trash. Basically, lead by example, exactly as Future Homestead said, which is something that Future Homestead is doing very well for her ACB Canada chapter. Should I say libtard more often? Yeah, we were talking to someone who was not necessarily like ACP sympathetic, like younger college age kids who came, and shout out to them for coming to the ACP conference to engage with our arguments, and actually see what we're all about. But Mauricio said libtard, and then the person was like, what did you just say? And he's like, I said sock them. That's what I would do if I was a sock them. She's like, oh, okay. She's about to get offended at libtard. Oh man, that was too funny. I just don't get it. Why could you be offended? Like, why are you going out of your way to get mad about that word? It's just such a stupid word. Who freaking cares? I don't know. That's how I look at it. But I prefer shit lib personally. Honestly, that's a better word. You're right, it is. Definitely. All right, let's libtard and sock them do sound pretty similar. Yeah, they're basically the same word, right? I'm sure she didn't catch that. Oh man, that's funny as hell. All right, let's watch Alex Jones do stand-up comedy for Doug Stanhope. This is pretty funny. I've watched part of it. You guys will laugh at this, I think. This is in 2002. So after 9/11, when Alex was pretty huge. I remember at my high school, people had InfoWars stickers on their locker. And I would go home and watch Alex Jones, and I'd be like, he seems a little crazy.
Holy shit. All right, everybody, here's the deal. We have a very, very special guest. He's going to come out here. He's going to talk to you. And he's going to bring up Dougie. I am a huge fan of his. It's an honor to bring him up here. Please keep it going for the Lord of Conspiracy, Alex Jones, everybody. Here he comes.
I feel sorry for you. I mean, you came out here to have a good time, and here's some great comics. And believe me, you've heard him. That last guy was absolutely amazing. And Doug's great too. He's a
highest polling party.
Degenerate atheist. But...
Sorry about that. We're gonna do Aaron Mate next. I was just trying to get that pulled up.
Other than that, he's a pretty good guy. No, but seriously, I'm not a comedian. And I've heard a lot of stuff about Iraq, and I've heard some other comments about politics. And let's just go over some basic stuff here for a minute, okay? This is not a drill. This is some serious shit. All right? I've got the film clip of Eisenhower back in 1958 calling Fidel Castro the Abraham Lincoln of the Caribbean. Maybe he...
Based. Fidel Castro is the Abe Lincoln of the Caribbean. What a perfect analogy. What a perfect analogy. They both got rid of the plantation class. It's like almost the exact same thing, except the U.S. had chattel slavery, whereas Cuba, technically, it was capitalism, and technically these people were wage laborers, but you know, they were living in company-owned housing, working on plantations 12 plus hours a day. They were basically slaves. And they had a civil war and overthrew the plantation owners that everybody hated. What does that sound like? Sounds a lot like the American Civil War. Eisenhower was, I think that's who he was talking about, right? Eisenhower said a lot of stuff that was based. Eisenhower was the first person to call out the military-industrial complex because it was fully forming when he was in office, and he warned us about it straight up. He's like, these people are making too much money off of weapons and war. War has become a business for them. They're going to continue to push for it, and you need to watch out for that. And he also said, I believe this was him, like every rocket that's fired or every gun that's fired or whatever by the military is a book that could have been in a school, or a school that could have been built, or a hospital or whatever. Basically, every dollar we spend on war is money that we can't invest in our people. And then he was saying the military industrial complex is making too much money off war, and they're controlling the government and turning it into a big money-making war machine, which is what the U.S. government is, or what it's become since then. So Eisenhower actually had a lot of based quotes. Fidel Castro was the Abe Lincoln of the Caribbean, being one of them, I guess.
He is. But my point is, they put that motherfucker in power. They put him in there. But it's not just him. It's everybody. It's Ho Chi.
He ended the Korean War too, right? I don't know. Did he? That's interesting. Maybe he did. I don't know. Why did the U.S. withdraw? Was that Eisenhower? I mean, they had basically just bombed the whole place, and the Koreans wouldn't give up, and they had already installed a fascist dictatorship in the South. So it was like they just and we were still technically on the gold standard by then, so they were limited to how much. So it probably was Eisenhower. Because the gold standard limited the U.S. to like how much money they could print, which limited their endless war spending, which was one of the reasons they went off the gold standard in 1971, was explicitly because of the Korean War and the Vietnam War and the inability to just spend endless money on bombing these people. So that's one of the reasons that the gold standard was abolished. And they probably did end the war because it was getting too expensive, and they were still losing.
Amen. It's Mao Zedong. It's Manuel Noriega. It's Osama bin Laden. It's Saddam Hussein. It's the Shah. They build them up, they knock them down, and I watch them stick our troops in these meat grinders. And it's all admitted. I'm the weirdo who sits there and watches C-SPAN documentaries where they've got the 85-year-old CIA section chief, who back in 1950 goes, well, actually, the CIA was behind Mao and we put him into power. Of course, I already...
What? What? The CIA was funding and arming the Kuomintang. They were funding the nationalists. What do you mean the CIA put Mao in power, Alex Jones? Also, how is this comedy? This isn't comedy. This is just like an Alex Jones show. But instead of covering like specific news stories, he's just ranting about, conspiracies in general.
Do that.
I mean, I guess I wouldn't expect Alex Jones to be a good comedian, right? It's not like he's good at like setting up jokes and making people laugh. He's good at, yelling, "They're turning the freaking frogs gay," and people laugh because he's so passionate. And then usually, you look into it and it's like, oh, there was a lake where they were putting chemicals in the water and it was creating all these hermaphroditic frogs. Like that actually happened. Like they were kind of turning the frogs gay or turning the frogs into hermaphrodites in this lake. And you always look into it, you're like, oh, Alex was weirdly kind of right. Like he had a good idea, or like what he was saying wasn't as ridiculous as it sounded. Like that's what's funny about Alex Jones.
Now these bastards are admitting it. Mao Zedong killed 50 million people. And they want to sit around and tell me about Saddam Hussein for some war for $4 trillion in oil? Oh, we wouldn't do that over oil. We're just the big badasses in the 100-story buildings that own and run the nuclear weapons, that own your private prisons, that they're going to stick you and your family in as soon as they find you doing something wrong, some bullshit law they created. So this is the reality.
The OSS did give guns to the Chinese communists against Japan. Oh, interesting. So that must be what he's talking about. This is what I'm saying, you guys. This is what I'm saying. You're like, he says the Chinese or the CIA put the communists in power. And you're like, that's ridiculous, Alex. And then you find out some hint of the truth that he was right about, like by accident. Like, oh, the CIA did give guns to Mao only because they hated Japan and saw the Japanese empire as a competitor, whereas they didn't see agrarian feudal China as a competitor. But yeah, there was a kernel of truth to what he was saying, as always, it seems.
And I have to sit here and watch.
I'm never gonna forget Jackson getting him to say that Stalin should have done away with more Trotskyites. Like, that was one of the greatest moments in human history. I don't care what you say.
Watch him setting this up, setting up a living hell for all of us. The boys running this country, and I mean Mr. Kerry and his cousin George W. Bush. His coffin made it stone.
Jones is a plant, making actual conspiracy sound stupid. Yeah, I get what you're saying. Max Blumenthal makes the argument in The Management of Savagery. Not that he's a plant, but that he distracted people from the real truth, right? By yelling about conspiracies and not always having it all right and jumping to conclusions and making it sound totally ridiculous. I don't think he's a CIA plant. If he was a CIA plant, they certainly wouldn't have charged him all that money for the Sandy Hook shootings. The number one sign that somebody's a CIA asset is if they get charged with something and the courts just randomly let them go, or the police just randomly let them go. That's a sign that someone's an agent. They were engaging in criminal activity because they're an agent, probably, or maybe not. But then they get caught by the courts, and then the CIA goes to the courts and the police and says, "This is one of our guys. Let him go." And they mysteriously let him go. This happened to Charles Manson like 8 times. He kept getting arrested, and he would just randomly be let go with no explanation because he was a CIA asset. Allegedly, he was though. But so they wouldn't have charged him all that money for the Sandy Hook thing if he was a plant. But Max Blumenthal makes a good argument there that he takes people who are suspicious of the government and who are questioning, whether or not conspiracies are true. And he, kind of spins them into, rather than making them into communists, he turns them into, they're turning the frogs gay. Alex Jones' energy is where it's at, though. Oh, definitely. Like, I'll be honest with you guys. I love Alex Jones. I was like, people were all melting down when Jackson went on his show. I'm like, what, bro? Alex Jones is a legend. Like, I do see what Max Blumenthal is saying, and he's gotten stuff wrong and he said dumb stuff. And the Sandy Hook thing, was, there were, legitimate mistakes and wrongdoings by Alex there for sure. But he has gotten a lot of stuff right. He's called a lot of crap out and he said a lot of hilarious stuff, and his energy is just hilarious. He's like a walking meme. So I'll always appreciate this man. Is Tucker a Fed though? I don't think so. He and his buddies are Zios. Yeah, I mean, he's not. When I say I love Alex Jones, I mean I love him as a walking meme. Like, it's not like I learned anything from him or, you know. Well, I mean, I guess you can learn something from anyone, but it's not like I see him as a political commentator. But I just see him as someone who looks at our, you know, is a little confused, but is angered at our establishment, as anyone should be. And he's just freaking goes out and yells about it.
These guys are the ones who put the Hitlers and the Stalins in. They're the people that create the crises to offer you the solutions. And somebody said 1984, and it's true. That's what it's all about. The war is against the people. The war is against the people. But going back to Saddam Hussein, I'm going to bring...
He says so much stuff that's true, though. He's like, look at all these terrible leaders that the CIA has backed, but yet they want to take out Saddam Hussein. Like, that's so true. It's so true. He gets so much right. I don't know. I don't think he made the audience laugh once, though, during this whole thing.
Is the head of our security.
Like, where's the joke here? Where's the joke, Alex? You didn't even try to do stand-up comedy. You just ranted about the same stuff you rant about on InfoWars. The night that comedy died, Alex Jones opens for Doug Stanhope. I wouldn't even, if I went to a comedy show to watch Doug Stanhope, who's meh, maybe that'll offend some people, but I feel like he's just okay. And Alex Jones came out and opened for him, I would be so pumped. That would be one of the greatest nights of my life. This is just boring George Carlin true. There's no laughter. There isn't. No, there's not. They allowed Jones into Bohemian Grove? For real? I could have done better. Oh, I believe that 100%, Joey. You definitely would have done better. 100%. I'd much rather watch you up there. We were talking about Max Blumenthal. He's done better stand up than that too. Oh, Alex Jones' Bohemian Grove footage went viral again because Ryan Garcia is in the news talking about it, I guess. This is my favorite Alex Jones picture, by the way. This is like his before. He actually showed this on his show. You know how he sells like supplements, like weird supplements? He was selling one of his supplements and he did a before and after, and he looks the same, like physically, except he turned red. He literally turned red. And he's like, take my supplement and you can, you know, undergo this transformation too in 45 days. Like, what, bro? You look the same, but now you're red. Like, what? Like, what the hell? Drunk, who was saying he has drunk alcoholic energy? Maybe that's why he's turning red. That's unfortunate if true. I don't know. The first Red Hulk. All right, let's listen to Aaron Mate a little bit. I'm gonna run to the bathroom and grab a drink of water, but I'll be listening, and then I will come back and react soon.
Was very close to Russia. And Zelensky, basically arrested their leader and took their opposition TV channels off the air. And Biden, the so-called, huge defender of democracy, cheered that move and encouraged it. And then also, I think, encouraged Zelensky to keep attacking the Donbass rather than do what I was saying before, which is implement the Minsk Accords, which is the peace deal reached in 2015 to end the war in the Donbass that began after the coup backed by the Obama-Biden administration back in 2014, which Trump did nothing to advance. Now, the one thing I'll say in defense of Trump is that to the extent Trump had any sincere desire to end the conflict in Ukraine, he was handcuffed by Russiagate, where he was framed as a Russian agent. And by calling him an agent of Putin, Democrats basically used that to coerce Trump or incentivize him to be more bellicose toward Russia, maybe more than Trump wanted to be, because Trump in 2016 did talk about how he wanted to cooperate with Russia and how he didn't want to fight a World War III over Ukraine. So Russiagate was used to basically constrain whatever diplomatic inclinations Trump may have had. I'm not saying he actually had them, but to the extent he had them, Russiagate certainly undermined that. And then Trump also had a neocon cabinet, Mike Pompeo, John Bolton, who all encouraged him to increase militarism inside Ukraine. And so There was nothing done to advance the Minsk Accords. And therefore, when Biden took office, he basically seized the, and by the way, the one time Trump did something concrete, he paused weapons to Ukraine, he was impeached. And that solidified a consensus that we should.
But he never actually paused them. He never actually, I mean, one of the funnest facts of that whole first impeachment saga that I feel like I'm the only one who knows, and maybe you know it as well, Aaron, because you're a little bit peculiar just like me, is that there was never actually a weapons shipment that was unsent, right? I mean, there was never a weapons shipment that was on schedule to be delivered to Ukraine that went unsent, right? And yet Trump was impeached rather over this kind of inconsequential, superficial delay that actually didn't amount to anything, which was
all right. No more Michael Tracy. He's actually a pretty good journalist, but he has a lot of really weird takes. He's one of those journalists who, you know, is pretty good at reporting on the world, but doesn't want to change the world, which is a lot of good independent journalists, but whatever. Whereas Aaron Mate, I would see as more of a advocacy journalist, more of a journalist who's willing to defend, you know, actual communist groups and actually fights against the purity fetish, really. But his analysis there on the dynamic between Trump and the Democrats involving Russia is so accurate, so accurate. The Democrats have been demonizing Russia forever. When you think about the NATO proxy war against Russia, it makes so much sense in the context of Hillary Clinton's Russiagate nonsense, this conspiracy theory that Russia rigged the 2016 elections, which is so funny because the Democrats always say that Trump is, you know, against democracy because he claims that the 2020 elections were rigged, when in fact the Democrats claim that the 2016 elections were rigged. So they both claim that the elections were rigged. But the Democrats claim that they were rigged by Russia with zero evidence. And what they do is they constantly accuse Trump of being Russia's puppet. And they do this, you know, anytime he does something like goes and talks to Kim Jong-un or whatever. They accuse him of being, you know, a suck up to these dictators. And then he becomes more hawkish. He becomes more imperialistic towards these countries. And it's like the stuff that the media attacks him the harshest for is the stuff he does that's good. Like when he, you know, builds relations with the DPRK, they're like, no, we're the United States of America. We don't cooperate with other countries. Our democracy, our freedom. Trump's an authoritarian dictator. He shook Kim Jong-un's hand. That they freak out when he does good things. And then they pressure him to do more bad things. They pressure him to be more hawkish, right? You're a puppet of Putin. You better surround Russia with the US military and give Ukrainian Nazis a bunch of guns. Otherwise you're Putin's puppet and Putin's rigging the election. And we're going to do 24/7 coverage for 4 years straight in order to push you to be more aggressive against Russia. Because that's the strategy that NATO laid out at their 2017 summit, is to continue pressuring and being aggressive towards Russia and China. So yeah, it's interesting to watch, and it shows you, you know, the posture of the media. Like I learned a lot about the media from the 2020 Bernie campaign, just with the way that they attacked Bernie. I'm like, wow. This guy's not even a socialist. He's a very mild social democrat. He just wants, like, you know, universal health care like the rest of the developed world has. And they're smearing him as a communist, and the media is pulling out all the stops to attack him and tear his campaign down. And, you know, the DNC illegally collaborated with the Hillary Clinton campaign to prevent Bernie from winning the primary and, you know, bringing the people health care like an authoritarian dictator. And, you know, that taught me a lot about the media and how far they'll go to smear you if you threaten corporate profits even a little bit. And also there's a lot to learn about corporate media from Trump, right? Because Trump isn't a politician. Sometimes he does anti-imperialist stuff. Sometimes he does anti-establishment stuff. And it's when he does that stuff, when he does things that are good, that the media heavily demonizes him and pressures him into doing more hawkishness, into dropping more bombs, into expanding U.S. drone warfare, into sanctioning our neighbors like Venezuela and Cuba. That's the role that the media plays. And, you know, that's the dynamic between Trump and the Republicans. Trump and the Democrats. Trump does something anti-imperialist. He does something legitimately anti-establishment. Oh, he's a dictator. Authoritarian dictator. You're telling me this guy doesn't want to starve the Venezuelan people? Holy shit, that's so authoritarian. Don't you know that the Venezuelans are starving? The Venezuelans are starving and Trump doesn't even want to starve them. That's so authoritarian.
That's a pretty good kind of emblematic symbol of the superficiality with which Trump was attacked by Democrats. Oh, impeach him for delaying, but then eventually sending within the prescribed period of time, but by
Okay, I'm sorry. This is a great question by Emily. I was going to type a response, but I got to say it. Do you agree with Haas when he said that we could never win an election? I do for the most part. Like, you know, bourgeois elections should not be viewed as like the main path to power. They should be viewed as a way to get our message out there and to get our theory out there. That being said, someone brought up Venezuela. They said we can't have a Hugo Chavez. And I think, you know, Haas said that won't happen in the US, which is fair. But the thing about Chavez is he only, like, they almost overthrew the government in 1992, right? They almost had a real revolution in 1992. And then in 1998, he wins election. And they, you know, they changed the government in these really radical ways to give more power and more control over the government to the Venezuelan people, to the masses, who then continued to elect the socialist government for the next, 2 decades plus. But it was more than just a bourgeois election, is what I'm saying. There was a revolution, right? The U.S. tried to coup Chavez in 2002, and the Venezuelan people hit the streets in mass and basically, demanded that they bring Chavez back, and the U.S. had to bring him back out of exile and put him back in power. Like, the Chavez only won that election because there was a revolutionary movement from the ground up, because the working class was organized, because the Chavistas were organized, and even armed in some cases, and because they were willing to hit the streets and fight for the revolution in a very revolutionary, non-electoral politics type of way. So I think in that kind of situation where you have a revolutionary uprising that can do things to protect the revolution and to, demand power from the state, otherwise we're going to just straight up overthrow you. In that kind of situation, like a Venezuela, I think it's possible, but, not just like running, like if, Cornel West or Karina and Claudia, God bless them for trying. They don't, they're never going to just win an election by running and campaigning like they have been. Like, the goal right now should be organizing workplaces and organizing communities, and basically, and then doing education and info war. Right, getting more information out there and elevating people's political consciousness, as well as getting them organized. That's the goal. That's how we achieve power eventually, whether, that involves a bourgeois election or not.
Statute, the weapon shipments to Ukraine. But that gets all lost in the memory hole now, so maybe I'm dwelling on ancient history, but I don't know, it's still crazy to me.
Well, it is. And imagine if there had been that much effort into promoting the Minsk Accords, which was the peace deal reached to end that war. Instead, there was a bipartisan consensus, illustrated by Adam Schiff getting up on the
overthrow, or perhaps the system will crumble on its own. I think that's the most likely. I think, which again, the solution is to get organized and build these community groups that can defend themselves and that can do things like grow food and protect each other, so that once the system starts to break down and devolve into like violence and warring factions, we can, protect each other and, rebuild with the kind of society that we want to see, a socialist society that takes care of people. But I think like a, Roman Empire type collapse is very likely in the U.S. I don't know if that'll lead to the U.S. borders being redrawn or whatever, but the state itself, the state that has no legitimacy with its own people, which has such tiny support with its own people, and the state where only 50% of the country, if that, votes in its elections, and that's that's the presidential election. That's 50%. The state and local elections are far less. Nobody believes in this state. Nobody believes in our system anymore. And people have, various wacky ideologies about why the system's so screwed up. But, you can't have a state that governs this many people that with no legitimacy, right? Eventually that's going to come to a head, and there's going to be like some kind of, at least a popular revolt or a collapse of the U.S. empire, especially with the way our economy's headed. Like, They're just seeing more and more deindustrialization, higher debts, higher cost of living, less good paying jobs. The people on top are getting richer and richer as the wealth is concentrated into just a few hands. Like this, we cannot keep going on this way. Something's gonna blow up, I think. But hopefully we just, win an election and we have socialism before all that happens. All right, I've gotten totally distracted from Aaron Mate here. We'll do a little more.
Senate floor during Trump's impeachment trial and saying that the United States aid Ukraine and their people so that we can fight Russia over there. We don't have to fight Russia here. So that was Adam Schiff declaring the bipartisan policy that we want to use Ukraine to fight Russia over there. And 2 years later, we got our result. Russia invaded Ukraine to end the fight. Now, Fred Fleitz's paper, I scanned it as he was speaking because I wanted to see, does he mention the Minsk Accords, the pact that could have resolved all this? No, he doesn't in that article. He also doesn't mention that in Istanbul in the spring of 2022, after Russia invaded.
Well, you can just do what Vaush did and deny that the Minsk Accords are real or deny that they happened and then act like I'm the idiot for bringing them up.
There were really serious talks between Ukraine and Russia, and they came very close to reaching a deal. But we know from multiple sources that Boris Johnson came over and told Zelensky that we're not going to back you up if you make a peace deal with Russia. And Ukraine needed Western backing because it wanted security guarantees to underpin any peace with Russia. And Boris Johnson basically gave the marching orders that, sorry, we're not going to give you that, and you should keep fighting Putin. And now here we are, more than 2 years later, hundreds of thousands of people dead, and neither political party is willing to go back and stand up for the fundamental solution here, which is just embrace diplomacy with Russia. Both parties have coalesced.
What's Aaron got on his bookshelf here? He's got Finkelstein's Gaza book. I've got that. Got some Chomsky. He's got A People's History of the World. Looks like Howard Zinn. This looks Stalingrad-based, pro-Soviet Union Aaron Mate, question mark? Is this Rosa Luxemburg? I like it.
Around undermining that, using Ukraine instead for a proxy war. And they advance this by pretending as if they have radically divergent policies when they're totally in concert with the other.
So I'm glad you brought up Boris Johnson, Aaron, because I want to show on screen Boris Johnson and Donald Trump reuniting at the Republican convention in Milwaukee. There they are giving a beautiful thumbs up.
What the heck? These guys look like Ronald McDonald. They look like they consist on a steady diet of nothing but Burger King. Like, you guys see what I mean when I say our government can't go on in this way because it's not a legitimate government? Like, these are supposed to be the leaders of the two most powerful countries in the world. These literal clowns. It's so funny how Boris Johnson just looks like the British, failed clone of Trump. Or like Trump's, younger brother. His younger British brother. It's different reboot, literally. The Ozempic might be working for Trump. He probably is on that Ozempic.
Up in good spirits. And I would love to have been a fly on the wall for that meeting. That's Boris Johnson.
Aaron's laughing as hard as I was at that picture.
Trekking to Milwaukee, Wisconsin, which I hear is where he spends his summer vacations ordinarily. So he would just happen to be in the area.
Hey, I've been to Milwaukee, Wisconsin. It's one of my favorite places.
It was funny because there was this oddball crew of random UK politicians who were at the Republican convention. I spotted Liz Truss, who was the prime minister for about a month and a half, Nigel Farage, and we were told that Boris Johnson was also gallivanting around. I didn't see Boris Johnson myself, but I wish I had because I would have just been basking in his glow. So I want to bring you up a column that Boris Johnson wrote in the Daily Mail after having met Trump in Milwaukee. And Boris Johnson says he is more convinced than ever that Trump has the strength and bravery to save Ukraine and end this appalling war.
Oh, boy. Oh, boy. I don't even really know what Boris's position on this is. He's he's got to be pro-proxy war, right? He would never step out of line with NATO. Boris Johnson was the one who they sent to break up the peace, not the Minsk Accords, but the peace agreement in 2022. Ukraine and Russia were negotiating a peace agreement. I can pull this up too. They had a peace agreement on the table that they were going to sign, and then NATO sent Boris Johnson to tell Zelensky, no, we don't want to appease Putin. We have to keep fighting Putin. So you have to send every last person in your country to die because we don't want to appease Putin. You can't sign this peace agreement and save hundreds of thousands of lives. So, you know, if people had any question about who's the main obstacle to peace in this conflict, it's of course NATO. It is not Russia, but I know that's hard for people to understand because Russia launched the invasion and so much the propaganda that we get, but more and more people are seeing it, I think. Everyone in our audience seems to get it. But I assume Boris Johnson is still pro-proxy war with Ukraine, right? And Trump has been talking about ending the war. You know, this has been one of the positions that he's been more based on, although he's been backtracking recently. So why? Why does Boris Johnson think that Trump can stop the war? Let's see.
He says, having talked to Trump this week, he's more convinced than ever that Trump has the strength and bravery to fix it and to save Ukraine. He says, whatever some other Republicans may have said about Ukraine in the past, I believe that Trump understands the reality that a defeat for Ukraine would be a massive defeat for America. It is.
So basically, he's saying, I trust that Trump won't end the war. I trust that Trump won't be an anti-imperialist. I trust that Trump will keep funneling arms to Ukraine. After talking to him, I trust that he will. I trust that he won't end this proxy war like he promised everyone he would. Interesting that Boris Johnson feels that way after talking to Trump. That he feels like Trump will not be ending the proxy war like he promised. And like so much of his working class base wants him to because they want that money reinvested at home. And it's also so funny how Boris Johnson says, you know, I trust that Trump will bring an end to the war by sending Ukraine more guns and weapons and being more aggressive towards Russia. Like, yeah, that's what definitely will end the war, Boris Johnson. Not the peace agreement that you told Ukraine not to sign. The peace agreement wouldn't end the war. More guns will end the war. You guys are fucking geniuses.
Is not just about the extinction of freedom and democracy, those cardinal American values, and the enslavement of the Ukrainian people, though that result would be grim in itself. Trump could simply do what's natural to him, end the bureaucratic dither and delay, and give the Ukrainians the permissions that they need, and then
Trump will just let the Ukrainians nuke Russia. See, Trump is a businessman. He knows how to get things done. He'll just give Zelensky nukes. He'll just escalate towards World War III, and then we'll have peace. You see, this is why we need a businessman who knows how to get things done. Because he'll give Zelensky the nukes he needs.
And then once Putin has once again been pushed back, he could offer the deal. So
he did want to nuke the hurricanes. That's true. Trump, in a meeting, apparently brought up the idea of nuking a hurricane.
That's Johnson basically echoing what a lot of these other people in the America First orbit seem to be suggesting that Trump would undertake to do when he's back in power, which is take the gloves off, at least for a period of time, in order to give Ukraine the most ideal, negotiating position, which, by the way, is functionally what the Biden administration has always at least claimed that their policy was. Like Blinken and Sullivan and people, they're not.
You can't nuke a hurricane. I mean, you can. Will it stop the hurricane? No. Will it probably cause an underwater earthquake and therefore a tsunami while also, unaliving like entire ecosystems of fish and marine biology? Yes. But he was just floating the idea. He was just throwing it out there. Any scientists in the room who know what would happen if we nuke the hurricane? I'm not saying we should do it. I'm just putting it out there as an idea. We have nukes. There is a hurricane. the obvious solution seems to be to nuke the hurricane.
Opposed on principle to there being a negotiated settlement, right? They're just saying we need to give the Ukrainians the maximum leverage as they enter.
Did you guys cover that leaked classified document to put Biden's plan to do nuclear war on 3 fronts? No, I didn't even see that, but that sounds about right. What are the 3 fronts? Like maybe Latin America, Cuba. I mean, they don't have nuclear weapons like Cuba and Venezuela and stuff, but like, I don't know, probably China, Russia, and then the Middle East is what I would guess. 3-way nuclear war. Is that what it is? Like against Iran, Russia, China, basically. I didn't cover that. Could you send that to it? I mean, you don't have to, Emily. Sorry, you don't have to, Future Homestead, if you don't want to. But if you don't mind, send me that on Discord. He wanted an excuse to push the big red button. Yeah, he did. He just wanted to hit the nuke button. He wanted to break it with a hammer. You don't have to send that to me if you don't want, Future Homestead. But if you get a chance, you could send it to me on Discord. I would like to cover that at some point. Russia, China, Iran. Yeah, I figured.
Enter any forthcoming or future negotiated settlement, and that requires having Ukraine be given the ability to beat back Russia in some of the much of the territory that Russia has seized. But that's Boris Johnson, who is now entered into like the folklore as the person who went to Kyiv in it was April of 2022, right, and then delivered what was perceived to be a message on behalf of also the Biden administration for Ukraine to keep fighting. They're going to get all the supplies they need. They're going to have the full-throated support of the U.S. and the UK and EU to wage the war in perpetuity and don't agree to any concessions. Now, maybe Ukraine.
Exactly. So Michael Tracy said it all there. But Boris Johnson thinks Trump will end the war by escalating the war. It's just pure nonsense. It's, it's bourgeois politics. Everything is turned on its head. Everything is opposite. We live in an upside down world, where we literally have politicians saying that we will end the war by escalating the war. It's wild. But yeah, here's what Future Homestead was talking about. There's this Palantir Technologies company. It's one of these Silicon Valley companies, or actually they're based in Denver, Colorado, but they're like a data analytics and software company. And they're very close to the U.S. state, and one of their spokespeople said this, or one of their strategists said that they're very likely headed for a 3-way war with Russia, China, and Iran. So that's what America needs right now. 80% of us are living paycheck to paycheck. 60% of us have medical debt, but if we just sent all of our kids to go fight a war with Iran, things should be fixed right just like that.
Bond Strategy Fund, and joins us now. Bill, thanks for getting up early for us. We appreciate it. I liked your new paper that you put out recently, noting we could see a bipolar world because of this war. Explain to us what you meant and what it might mean to markets.
Did you say a bipolar world? Not a multipolar world, so there's going to be just 2 countries? Or did he mean a bisexual world?
Well, Brian, thank you for inviting me back. It's good to be back with you. I think when we start looking at the medium-term implications of what's happening with the Russia-Ukraine crisis, one of the elements that we've been digging into are maybe the secondary.
Future Homestead. Oh, you sent it to me? Okay, thank you. So it's a different thing. This is a different thing. This is just some strategist talking about how we should enter a 3-way nuclear war. I'm just gonna open. See, this is why I needed you to send it to me, Future Homestead. I'm not smart enough. I'm not cut out for all this. Actually, like, research is the main thing I do, so I should be able to use Google, but come on, Discord, load the hell up. I'll do it on my iPad. Let me just text it to myself. or email it to myself rather. Where did it go? Now it won't. The email didn't send, of course. All right, whatever. I got Discord up. All right, here it is. Oops, just opened my email on stream. That's awesome. I don't think there's anything important on there. Oh shoot, of course. Hold on. I think I actually have a New York Times subscription. It's like $3 a month or something. Probably shouldn't be doing this on stream. Let me not let you guys see everything all my private information. My New York Times account, very highly classified stuff there. Okay. Biden approved secret nuclear strategy refocusing on Chinese threat. Big story, surprised no one is talking about it, says Future Homestead. Yeah, me too. I'm surprised I didn't hear about this. In a classified document approved in March, the president ordered U.S. forces to prepare for possible coordinated nuclear confrontations with Russia, China, and the DPRK. Wow. President Biden approved in March a highly classified nuclear... And they say here Biden has been against nuclear proliferation. Yeah, that's what he says. So he says, yet he's pushed us closer to nuclear war at every turn. President Biden approved in March a highly classified nuclear strategic plan for the United States that for the first time reorients America's deterrent strategy to focus on China's rapid expansion in its nuclear arsenal. The shift comes as the Pentagon believes China's stockpiles will rival the size and diversity of the U.S. and Russia over the next decade. Interesting. So China's moving that fast that they're already going to rival the U.S. military. Just wild. The White House never announced that Mr. Biden had approved the revised strategy, calling the Nuclear Employment Guidance, which also newly seeks to prepare the United States for possible coordinated nuclear challenges from China, Russia, and North Korea. The document, updated every 4 years or so, is so highly classified that there are no electronic copies, only a small number of hard copies given to Pentagon officials. But in recent speeches, 2 senior administration officials were allowed to allude to the change and carefully constrain single sentences ahead of a more detailed unclassified notification to Congress expected before Biden leaves office. The president recently issued updated nuclear weapons employment guidance to account for multiple nuclear-armed adversaries. Viping Narang, an MIT nuclear strategist who served in the Pentagon, said earlier this month, before returning to academia, and in particular, he added the weapons guidance accounted for the significant increase in the size and diversity of China's nuclear arsenal. U.S. is prepared to respond to nuclear crises that break out simultaneously or sequentially. So yeah, they're basically prepping themselves for nuclear war with these countries. Which is, of course, they frame it as if it's defensive, right? In case a nuclear conflict breaks out, as if it appears out of nowhere, as if China and Russia just nuke us for no reason, as if we're not putting NATO troops at their border right now, as if we're not funneling military supplies into Ukraine right now and trying to do the same shit in Taiwan. And as if it's not us sanctioning these countries and dumping tons of money into putting our military more, or making our military more present in the South China Sea. Right? It's us. It's us that are pushing towards a nuclear war. It's us that are making it so the Pentagon has to create a nuclear war strategy. It's not that nuclear war just appears in a vacuum, or China or Russia are going to decide to nuke us one day, or the DPRK, although that's how the media, portrays it. Any day, Kim Jong-un could just get real annoyed and we're all getting nuked. That's how other countries work. They're not rational and smart like us here in the U.S. We would never push towards nuclear war here in the U.S. As if a nuclear war on 3 fronts is winnable. No kidding. Whatever. President Xi, liberate us now. Just kidding. The only people who are going to liberate us are ourselves, the American Communist Party and the American working class. So join the American Communist Party at acpus.us. Follow them on X at ACP Maine. Get involved with your local chapter, and let's start working to improve this country. All right, everybody. That's all for me today. Thank you for hanging out on this super secret pop-up stream, the surprise stream. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it was a pleasant surprise to see my ugly face today. Thank you for all your support. Thank you to all these super chatters. If you want to continue to support the show and the Institute and the ACP, patreon.com/MidwesternMarx is a great way to do so. But anyways, thank you very much. Keep the struggle going, and we'll see you on the next stream.
Stand up, all victims of oppression, for the tyrants fear your might. Don't cling so hard to your possessions, for you have nothing if you have no right. Let racist ignorance be ended, for respect makes the empires fall. Freedom is merely privilege extended, unless enjoyed by one and all. So come, brothers and sisters, for the struggle carries on. The International unites the world in the song. So comrades, come rally, for this is the time and place. The international ideal unites the human race. Let no one build walls to divide us, walls of hatred nor walls of stone. Come greet the dawn and stand beside us. We'll live together or we'll die alone. In our world poisoned by exploitation, those who have taken, now they must give. And end the vanity of nations, we've but one earth on which to live. So come, brothers and sisters, for the struggle carries on. The International unites the world in the song. So comrades, come rally, for this is the time and place. The international ideal unites the human race. And so begins the final drama, in the streets and in the fields. We stand unbowed before their armor, we defy their guns and shields. When we fight, provoked by their aggression, let us be inspired by life and love. For though they offer us concessions, change will not come from above. So come, brothers and sisters, for the struggle carries on. The International unites the world in a song. So comrades, come rally, for this is the time.